Hello everyone, welcome back. Sorry I'm a bit croaky. Welcome to the Rec Hangout, the Recruiters Hangout. Thank you very much for joining me on this lovely day. I'm Louis Welcomme from Colleague Software. We provide CRMs to recruitment agencies. We're going to have a fantastic discussion today. The topic is, for this month's Hangout, how to build a strong recruitment brand, or how to build a strong brand for your recruitment business, whether you're an in-house recruiter or an agency recruiter. This should be useful. We've got some fantastic guests, but first let me introduce our hosts. We've got Alan Whitford from Abtech Partnership RC Euro, who'll be leading the way in the interrogations and questioning. We got here Mark Stevens from Smart Recruit Online and the Recruitment Alliance, who's our co-host. We've got Louise Triance from UK Recruiter. She will be keeping an eye on your Twitterings and your tweetings. Hashtag Rec Hangout, please do join us. You can also use the webinar jam stream on the right, here, and you can post your questions and comments on there. We're joined by some excellent guests today. We've got Felix Wetzel here, Marketing Executive and Advisor to Candarine and eiTalent, formerly at Jobrapido, Evenbase and JobSite. Thanks for joining us, Felix. We've got Clair Bush here, Marketing Director at Recruitment Technology Business Broadbean, very well-known technology company. If you don't use them, check them out. We've got Paul Sharpe here, Marketing and Sales Director from InterQuest Group PLC, niche recruitment agency, one of colleagues' customers, our favourite customer, I think, I'm sure, Paul. And we've got here also Russell Amerasekera. I hope I pronounced his surname right, Russell, from Epiphany, personal branding expert. I've seen Russell speak before, fantastic speaker, so we look forward to hearing from him. Alan, I'll let you kick it off and I'll go quiet and give my voice a rest.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you everyone for joining us. Our second event for the 2015 series of Rec Hangout. I'm glad that we have a great panel with us today who know everything there is to know about branding, its impact on either employment, or Russell will talk about the impact on your personal brand. And we've got a nice mixture of people who have been on all sides of this equation. So I might just, we'll kick it off with a primary question will be, does brand really matter? But we'll ask each of you just to introduce yourselves a couple minutes and what you think about this whole brand question. And I'm going to go left to right on my screen, so I'm going to start with Clair Bush from Broadbean. Claire, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Alan. So yeah, Marketing Director at Broadbean, just over 2 years now that I've been here. My background includes recruitment agency, marketing. I've been at the job boards for a while as well. Been in the recruitment space only for about I think 10 to 12 years now, but it's just, yeah, it's the place that I love to be. And I think kind of going back to your question around branding, for me it's really important to have 100% commitment, I think, in yourself to do your job, but also to the brand that you're doing that for. So for me, branding is now just the only medium that I think consumers engage with, and it's what they make their decisions on as far as I'm concerned. So I lead with the brand in all instances and make sure that everything else follows.
Perfect, Claire. That sounds like we're pretty much done with the show now then.
Done. Can I go now?
Keep going. That's great. Felix Wetzel, I've known you for a long time. I always said you were one of the most creative hires that JobSite ever made, actually bringing someone in who actually knew something about brand and marketing into a job board. It was quite a unique thing to have done at those days. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you stand in this whole brand question? Okay, I'm not sure, Felix, could you hear us on that? And if you could join us, that would be great. And you'll have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I just needed to find the unmute button. As Louis said, I worked for JobSite and Jobrapido in Evenbase, and obviously there was responsible for the brand of JobSite especially, and beforehand worked on non-recruitment related brands like Marlboro and others in Germany. So for me, the brand thing is, you need to be always very careful what brand actually stands for, and there's such a big problem with the whole definition of brand, so I prefer to talk about reputation instead of brand. and looking at the reputation where this comes from. And more, especially with social media, what I think about branding is that the brand depends on the people within a company, because they actually make your brand. And so that's one point, because that's where the brand comes from, but then, or the reputation comes from. But then the other aspect that you have about a brand is that actually you can't control your brand, because the brand is the conversation that happens about you that you can't influence. So it's an interesting thing that often marketers always believe that brand is something you can control, and because before social media, we didn't know all of these conversations going on, and now more and more you actually realize that you have no control about your brand. You can just only influence how you are perceived in the wider audience.
And I think that's going to be a good stream for us to discuss, Felix. It's kind of what I call the, it's not what you say anymore, it's what they say about you, which is, I think, something that Russell, I think, will probably have a little bit of impact on that as well. Thanks, Felix. Good intro. Paul, I'm going to come over to you now. You've been showing how brand actually matters to the recruitment business as well as to its end customers. I want you to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and where you start on this question.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for the introduction. So Paul Sharpe, Sales and Marketing Director for the InterQuest Group. Been here 3 years. Prior to this, I worked for Adecco, and before that, I worked in-house for Exchanging. And prior to that, I spent 8 years at Adecco, so I've been there twice for my sins. In terms of what does marketing mean for me, I think there's a massive convergence at the moment going on between in the marketing space and recruitment space, and I think there's not many organisations, certainly that I've spoken to, that understand the importance that marketing's got to play in recruitment. And I think some of the earlier comments around virtual brands now and brands not being quite what they used to be. So brand for me used to be something like Woolworths, and you experience that brand by walking down the high street and then walking in the store and experiencing the brand. But now with the advent of technology, and in particular with the emergence of all the social media channels, it's become much more harder now to control your brand, as was said earlier, but also to get your brand out there in the marketplace. It's just changed enormously. So I think marketing on the recruitment function is now just absolutely critical for everybody, whether you be a recruitment company or whether you be an organisation.
All right, thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. I think that's going to fit right in with our themes. I think we should have a fun conversation today. And finally, our final guest today, Russell. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name, so Felix has already done that for us. It'd be good if you could introduce yourself. And you've got you're billed as our personal brand expert today, but I think what you do is a lot more than just an individual's brand, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Alan. Thank you very much, and hi, guys. Yes, I'm a specialist in personal branding, and I work with business leaders, I work with private individuals, I work with celebrities, and I really look at, what are people famous for? What do you stand for? And then how do you take yourself to market on a personal level? So how do you make an impression when you walk in a room? How do you hold an audience? How do you captivate people with your story and your messages? And look, where do I stand on this? And let me be a little provocative. I think actually that the recruitment industry is very unimaginative when it comes to taking itself to market. And the reason why I believe that to be so is whilst many companies invest hugely in their corporate brand, very, very few that I've come across invest in their personal brand. And in an environment where it's very difficult to get differentiation, to stand out as a business and as a brand, not using the opportunity to sell who you are as a person and how you connect with people, to me, limits your ability to be able to sell yourself.
Okay, I think that's an interesting point, and I think that's a nice way for us to lead into so let's have this sort of first debate, if you will. A lot of our audience are obviously recruitment agencies, and we've had this conversation many times about where does the recruitment agency fit into this whole brand piece, both for their own brand, because if they don't do a good job, then their own brand suffers, but also they are the holder, if you will, of the brand of their clients. The recruitment agency is perceived by the candidate as actually the first port of call when it comes to talking about it and then to hire an organization. So where do we, as a group, where do we think that we can make that impact? What do we have to do to actually present our customer's brand and care for that in the best possible way? And I'll open that to the floor. Whoever jumps in first can have the first go at that one.
I'd just like to kick it off. I think it's really important that the agencies themselves understand who they are so that their brand is kind of visible in the first instance. I think if they don't understand what their proposition is or how they're differentiating themselves from their competitors in a massively competitive marketplace, then how can anything that they do stand out? How can, it's not necessarily their brand, but how can their personality stand out, or how can their good work stand out if they don't know internally who they are and what they do? So for me, it's all about fixing that first bit, really.
I think the key, Alan, is culture. The key is your business culture, knowing what you stand for, like Claire said, getting that right, and then recruiting the right people that match the culture that you stand for. And then everything else in terms of branding and marketing in the ideal world would stem from that. And marketing people like Claire and I would only be communicating the reality of the situation, which is the ideal, what we'd hope for. So recruitment bosses need to start letting their consultants stand out as their personal brands need to let them stand out. And if they don't want their personal brands and personal culture of their employees to have a public face, they might be recruiting the wrong people, I'd like to say. So that might be a good start. So sorry, I'll let the guests speak.
So, all right, Louis, you are a marketing guy after all. Paul, I'm going to let you, if you wouldn't mind coming to that, a little bit of what Claire was saying. And you've done a lot of work on the brand at InterQuest, but how much of that is on the personal, individual employee side, as Louis is saying, and I know Russell's anxious to jump in on this one now as well. But also in terms of, do you embrace your customers as part of that journey you took with InterQuest in creating that brand?
Thanks, Alan. I think for me, it's about being really clear what the strategy of the organisation is and what you're trying to achieve, what your message is, what your identity is. We've talked about a couple of different things there, one being internal in terms of people and one being external in terms of customers and or candidates. So there's a few different sort of channels there to think about. I think the brand for me is a means in which you engage with people, whether that be internal or external, and what you want to be known for from a sort of a business value proposition. And I think that's got to be the starting point for us. 3 years ago, we realised that the proposition that we had was quite confusing. We had lots of different brands, a very loose confederation of lots of different brands. There was no identity, there was no meaning. People said they didn't really understand what one part of the organisation did versus another. So I think for me, there's a piece before the brand, which is actually about getting your strategy right and being clear in the market what you're trying to get across and what you're trying to stand for.
That's an interesting point. I was going to say, did somebody want to chip in and start us off with, where does a small company start the process of evaluating what their brand strategy is and how they're going to go about developing their reputation in terms of brand?
I think for me that has to start with the business strategy. What's the purpose of the business in the first place? And if the marketing strategy is anything, it is pretty much the window on the world on how you're then going to conduct that business. I think marketing strategy and business strategies go hand in hand, and if you try and separate them out, you'll either fail at one or the other, if not both.
Well, and Russell, when you're doing your work, obviously when you go and talk to someone about, say, a guy at HSBC or someone saying, "Oh, I'm going to talk to you about your personal brand," but doesn't that does have to follow what Claire and Mark are talking about, doesn't it? Which is, where's the strategy? How does that fit into the whole piece? Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally would, and I think one of the traps that many companies fall into, both small companies and big companies, is that they can make this whole process incredibly over-complex, like many things in business. And it's a bit of a misnomer to think that you need to spend fortunes on a very expensive brand and marketing strategy. I don't believe you do. A lot of it is about going back to the essence of who you are and what you're about. So one of the challenges that I give to businesses when I go in and I talk to them, both large and small, is what's your story? what is it about you that makes you stand out? And I have a number of questions actually, which I ask both individuals and businesses to really look at. And the first one being, look, what are you famous for? Why should I choose you? Why should you really stand out? And then secondly, what do you stand for? Because if your customers don't actually know what you stand for, why would they buy you? Why would they choose you? Why would they pick you above any other business that's out there? And then perhaps third and most important of all is, how do you want to be perceived? Because if you don't know how you want to be perceived, then you've got no chance of really being able to sell yourself in an effective way to clients. And there's a wonderful quote which the chairman of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, uses, which describes beautifully what a personal brand is. And he says your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think that's a very interesting question to ask yourself, whether you're a big company, a small company, what is it that people say about you when you're not in the room? And if you can't answer that question, I don't believe you can sell yourself.
Thanks, Russell. I think you're quite right. And Felix, I think that probably relates well to the marketing, your background originally in FMCG and that sort of marketing where it was all about the product. But before you could create the marketing for the product, you had to know what the product was. And I think perhaps as businesses, we sometimes tend to forget that piece is what is it that we really are. We could use the old phrase of employee value proposition, but it's much more about what do we stand for, what is our business, what are we trying to achieve, and then create our marketing plan. Does that tie in with the way you see things evolving now, Felix?
Absolutely. That's exactly how I see it. And for me, I think we all say the same. You heard through everybody, we all said the same thing, that you need to understand where are you now. The second thing is where do you want to go? And the third thing, how are you different from the other people that are in the marketplace? And the fourth thing is actually, do I have the resources to do what I want to do, and is it connected to the base where I'm coming from? So I think, if it's a personal brand, if it's a product brand, is it an employer brand or corporate brand, they all ultimately follow the same structure. But I think, I completely agree with what Claire says. It's important that the marketing brand or marketing strategy and brand strategy is linked to the business strategy.
Okay, so we have from one of our comments, one of our viewers hasn't always been said that in recruitment people buy from people, but I think that's in sales of any type. If our industry, recruitment industry, is really, it's all about the people, whether it's our consultants or our managers, how do we make sure that we are able to create that knowledge within our employees before they take it out to their business? Russell?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because in my experience, this whole thing about how do you sell yourself, a lot of businesses are very timid about that process. And one of the things that I see in the recruitment industry, funnily enough, more than many other industries, is that there is a tendency to try and mimic your client, to be the same as your client, even to the point where you get highly talented people going in there and speaking as if they're their client. The jargon, the FTE, the employee, all of these kind of terms. And my experience of this is what a client really wants from anybody that adds value is for you to think differently, to not think like them, and to challenge their thinking. And I think there's a real danger in trying to actually mirror the style and the brand of your client, because the one thing that will do is it will ensure you don't stand out. And I'm seeing a real sea change amongst businesses, particularly advisory businesses now, where clients are saying, I only want to hire people who can challenge me, who can help me think differently, who can add something different. And I don't believe how that it's possible to really engage with clients in a meaningful way when you're trying to be exactly the same as them.
Interesting approach on that, Russell. Paul, how do you see that? Is it, and one of our viewers, Sebastian, is also saying, isn't it sometimes difficult for clients to know what they want from a recruitment agency or brand if so many of the agencies all seem to be saying they're doing the same thing or they are the same thing? How do you differentiate that then, Paul?
I can only speak from my experience working for InterQuest, so I'm sure it'll be different per company, but from my perspective, customers want reassurance that we're able to, connect and engage with, talent, specialist talent, people that are hard to find, difficult to get hold of in the market, aren't always on LinkedIn, etc., etc. And I think that's for a number of different reasons. I think certainly first and foremost, there's outside influences around changing behaviour from a candidate perspective. And I think people, don't want to be sold to now as much as what they used to do. I hear more and more, certainly in the professional space, of people turning off their LinkedIn profiles, fed up of being contacted by agencies, etc., etc. Same with companies to some degree. And I think from an organisational perspective, from a customer perspective, I think what they want to see and hear is how you're engaging with people. And I think that's about, how do people touch and feel your brand before you're actually doing business with them? So, how are you representing yourself out in the marketplace? How are you adding value to them as an individual? How are you sharing information, connecting them with like-minded professionals? And in doing so, you will stand, for me, a lot higher chance of engaging with those people. And certainly from the customers that I speak to, they recognise that it's getting harder and harder to reach, difficult and hard to fill roles, which is why, a lot of companies now are doing more and more generic recruitment and doing it very well, I hasten to add. So it's the difficult stuff, the hard to fill roles. That's the stuff for me that they're really interested in. And for me, it's about how you engage with those communities. How do you find them, engage with them, and then at some point, hopefully, they become somebody who you can place into a customer.
That seems a little bit, Paul, around the theme, and I think, Claire, I'm going to come over to you for this. Claire, you mentioned that your thought about how do you have to stay true then to why you set the business up in the first place. And you think then that some of the recruitment agencies maybe have lost the plot a little bit on that, is that they started out maybe to be a specialist in SAP or whatever it might be, and then they just end up kind of losing their way about what they started out to be.
It's kind of like the old adage, if it was easy to do, everybody would be doing it, right? So recruitment is typically a hard job. You've got lots of challenges, you've got lots of people in the mix, and people are, by very essence of them, totally independent and totally different from one to the next. So not one way of communicating or engaging with any single person is going to be the same again for somebody else. And I think what we try to do is almost create a blanket solution, and that marketing is that a magic pill that will kind of connect groups of people so that you can mass fill those roles. And actually that's not actually what happens. Yes, there's loads of technology out there that can help you get your messages out there. And there's loads of job boards that obviously focus on bringing particular talent pools or communities together as well for you. So there's lots of ways to speed up that market, but getting your brand out there, I think going back to Paul's points, is about that engagement piece. And the thing that I really kind of like to do quite often actually is look outside of the industry and look at what's happening outside of recruitment. And for me, digital marketing, inbound marketing, content-led, we talked about storytelling right at the beginning, to be able to bring all of that into the recruitment marketing space and to use some of those tools, I think will kind of almost revolutionize the way that small businesses actually, because they're the most agile, and the recruitment agencies that are out there that got one or two great marketeers, or anybody that really just wants to get on and see how these kind of campaigns can pan out, they'll be the ones that start to change the marketplace. They'll be the ones that are starting to get to the candidates faster and more effectively and make the big wins. And that will transpire through, I think, to the candidate experience. And that's where the voice is going to be the thing that changes the marketplace for me. Sorry, there was lots there.
No, that's great, Claire. No, I appreciate it. You pulled a lot of themes together there. And Mark, you've been sort of pinging us some stuff in the back channel, so to speak, about don't we still run this risk of companies still thinking that, well, if we're advertising jobs or promoting jobs, the most important thing is getting our logo out there because we think that's the brand, as opposed to how do we get those job descriptions working that actually are talking about what the essence of being at the business, what the essence of the work is. And to me, that's a whole different approach to brand, isn't it? Mark, do you want to comment on that? Because you started me thinking on this theme.
Yeah, it's taking us off topic a little bit, but obviously very relevant to anybody that's recruiting. Clients are keen to sort of use the job advertising process as an opportunity to, strengthen their brand in the marketplace. But I personally don't believe that's possible just from running an advertising campaign for a job. Obviously, winning a share of mind is the repetition of people seeing your brand out there in the marketplace, but it does all come back to this reputation issue. And when we're talking to clients, we try to suggest to them that rather than trying to win clients' minds during the recruitment process, they would be better to concentrate on the candidates that have actually applied for their jobs and give them a better experience during the application process, so that they build a reputation as a company that cares. Just simple things like acknowledging receipt of their applications and keeping them informed throughout the process itself can have a much more powerful impact on the relationship between the customer and the candidates that showed an interest in their business in the first place. So that's where I was leading to.
Yeah. All right, Mark, thanks. We've got a good question from one of our viewers, and I'll just do a quick reset first. This is Rechangout, hashtag Rechangout on Twitter. Obviously, we're here live on Google Plus Hangouts. We've got a great lineup with Claire, Paul, Russell, and Felix discussing the impact of brand. What does it actually mean for your business as well as for your customers? Had some good discussion so far. We're on for about another 35 minutes. For those of you that are having possible trouble logging in, or you're in a car or on a mobile, the full stream is available on YouTube and on the Rec Hangout channel, on the colleague channel. UK Recruiter, F10 Group, and RC Euro will all have it available. In fact, Claire, I'm pretty sure you'll probably stick it up somewhere as well afterwards. So yes, you can get to this chat and watch the full video afterwards as well. Louise Triance, UK Recruiter, will do the blog post, which we then all unashamedly nick and put up on our sites afterwards also. So lots of ways for you to still catch on with us afterwards. Now, one of our viewers, John, has asked, how can the small recruitment firms, those with very limited budgets, how can they get their brand out and get the same kind of results and compete with the bigger guys? And I guess that's a question for a lot of us small companies. What do you think, Felix? How does a small guy compete with the big guys?
I think the small guys, the key thing to see is like how can the small guys differentiate to the against the big guy. So what is their niche? What is their speciality that they can give and can do better than the big guy? If they just try to copy the big guy and compete with them, then they will lose. So for me, it's all about going back right to the start. What is it you do differently? What are you really, really good at, and how can you identify the target market that is so special that you can grow from there outwards instead of trying to take on the big guy on every single part of the value chain.
All right, Louis, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, actually, about how the work you've done from a marketing and branding perspective has started to raise the profile of your business. What advice do you have for the small companies?
Well, I mean, we're a colleague. We're only 20 people. So the great thing about the internet and the great thing about modern marketing methods and branding methods is that a small business or one person or a medium-sized company can make as much good noise out there as much as the bigger company can, especially if they're a niche recruitment agency. So my advice would be to speak. If you're in a niche, speak to the people in your niche, speak to the bloggers, speak to the content creators, speak to your candidates and clients and ask them to create content for you. You don't need to write it all yourself. I've barely said anything today. These guys are all creating the content for me now, and then I'll stick it on the colleague blog and push it out there with our logo on it. So that's the way to do it. Speak to all your specialists. Ask them to do white papers that people can download from your site. Ask them to come on webinar shows with you. Ask them to write for your blog. Speak to your employees. If they're interested, they'll write for you. And then just start pushing that out through all your social networks, through email marketing works still really well, and start to build these relationships over time around the content you're creating and around what you and your clients and candidates are interested in, rather than selling all the time. Just build conversations and then start going to events, and that is a marketing strategy in a few croaky seconds, and that's what we do at Colleague, and I think we've managed to get our brand perhaps out there just as much as the bigger tech companies, I hope, if I humbly suggest. So.
All right, thanks, Louis. Paul, you might be on the opposite side of this question. You're coming from a larger company, but I think the challenge is the same for both sides, isn't it?
I think it's a great question, and when I worked for Adecco, the marketing team was sort of 35 strong. So that's what you get when you're going to start to try to compete with the big boys, which is what was said earlier. I think in terms of the smaller agencies, I think it's about starting off small and building up. I think it's about realising the benefits from what you're doing. If I cast my mind back sort of 3 years ago, it's just me and the marketing manager, or it's more her really, because I just took the glory for all the work she did. And we've built the team up. We've seen the benefit. We've used content. We've done quite a bit of things that Louis mentioned, which is using candidates or customers to post comments or to help make an observation, whether it be on the market or some skills or just something in fairly generic terms. So it needn't be expensive. There are ghostwriters out there who can help you pull articles together, or you can do what Louis does, which is just pinch everybody else's idea and then just put the colleague name around it, which is why we're a good customer, by the way. So it needn't be expensive is my message to everybody. It's about understanding what you can do. It's about using the content, and it's about building on it slowly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Russell, I know you've been champing at the bit to dive into this one now. And certainly, it would seem to me that the impact, if it's a smaller business, the impact of the individuals in that business, their personal brand, is pretty much what is the brand of the business, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so, Alan, and that was the point that I really wanted to make. And I agree with Paul's comments. It doesn't need to be expensive. What is important is to have a point of view. And if you're really going to make yourself stand out as a small business, it's critical to have a point of view, because otherwise, as has been said already, if you're trying to put yourself and play in the same spaces as the bigger companies, you'll just simply lose. And one of the things that I think is a very interesting opportunity for small businesses is to go back to this point about telling your story. What is it you really want to say? What's your point of view? And how do you stand out? And I think once you spend a little bit of time really thinking about that, there are plenty of routes to market. For example, just coming on something like this, or speaking at a conference, finding ways in which you can get your point of view across. And that's really about developing a personal marketing strategy. And, to me, that's a very creative, inexpensive way for being able to compete with some of the larger companies. And it's amazing what you can get published, particularly with social media now being so prevalent. If you have a point of view, if you're willing to have a point of difference and to stand out, and that would really be my advice is to any small business, is really spend some time thinking about what your story is and thinking about what your point of view is.
All right, I think that's perfect. And Claire, I know you had something you wanted to add to this, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of, I suppose it's summarising what everybody else has sort of said, but we talk a lot in marketing strategy terms of, how do you want to go to market? And one of the big things for us at the moment is looking at piggybacking strategies. So, what else is going to take me to market faster and with more, less effort, I suppose, on my side, but in a controlled and kind of exacting measure, something that I can turn around and go, yeah, that worked or it didn't work. And I think with branding, it doesn't matter what size the business is, so long as you know what you're all about, you can be as big or as little as you need to be. You can be as discreet or as kind of out there and shouting it from the rooftops, so long as you fundamentally know who you are and what you're trying to do. And I think the marketing plan piece doesn't, I think we've already said this as well, it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be war and peace. It could literally be like, okay, I've got an idea for getting out there like this, like a webinar. But where else can I take it? And almost mind map everything that you could possibly do with one bit of content. And then once you've repeated that a couple of times, it becomes second nature. You kind of fall into a routine of, well, I must blog about this, or I must tweet about that, or I'm going to follow some more people today, and then my network grows. And so it becomes by virtue a kind of cycle that continues. And no, I think that's the best thing about being in this field, is that no day is ever the same. And also it means that I'm learning constantly, but I'm also working on what I've done from yesterday and kind of moving that forward as well. And I think that's something that we always need to remember.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And a nice little wrap up there for us. I've got another one from one of our viewers, Roger Ashworth. And by the way, viewers, if you don't want me to say what your name is, you better put that in your post. Otherwise, we are going to name you. But Roger brings up the point and brings it back to the fact that we are in recruitment, and that we're putting candidates into companies. They're helping to pay for this. So, in fact, the candidate might be perceived as our product. But it's an active product that could actually have an impact on what our customers think of our brand based on our candidates. So don't we need to actually spend a little bit more sort of pre-placement and post-placement time with our candidates on actually making sure that that they're going to reflect our brand appropriately? I'm going to kick that back to you right away, Paul.
I think he's absolutely right, and I think we frequently we do exactly that, and you know, we're no better here than probably most other agencies. And certainly from some of the research that I've seen and done, you know, the vast majority of consultants, once they've placed somebody, you know, that their interest in that candidate is minimal. And you know, some of the comments and feedback that I've come across over those sort of last 5-6 years of my career is, you know, contractors and candidates saying, well, why are you contacting me? Because, you know, nobody's contacted me for the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and you only ever ring me or contact me when you want something. So I think the point is absolutely spot on, and I think what we're getting into here is that when we talk about brand is such a broad subject. It's absolutely huge. It's you know, not only how we're represented through what we're putting forward to a customer, it's how we you know, behave internally. It's how we represent ourselves to the outside market through, you know, things like websites and you know, the social media channels. It's how people find us through SEO. It's how people read about us through content or PR or articles. It's just such a massive subject.
Well, yes, it is. It is a massive subject, and I think perhaps one of the challenges is that we have a dynamic product. Felix, when you and I talked when you first came into this sort of thing into recruitment, you'd been used to working with what might be a static product. So, you know, the product is the brand into a lot of people's minds. Where do you see that impact now of our dynamic product, our candidates, and how do we work on that?
Well, I think the importance is that we need to see that actually in recruitment we're dealing with a luxury product. We never see it like this, but if you think about it, if I'm an employer and I pay somebody £30,000, or if I'm a small company and I pay somebody £30,000 salary, that's a big luxury item. And even from the job seeker's perspective, if I'm, you know, making the decision which next job to take, that potentially takes me as long as deciding which new car I want to buy. But we're not treating the whole recruitment, you know, the taking candidates, bringing candidates into companies as a luxury purchase. If you would buy a new car that is cost £30,000, you would be treated completely differently. You know, there would be after sale, post sale, in between, while you make a decision, waiting for your car, you get something. And I think that's something where we can take actually some learnings from other luxury products and bring them into the recruitment cycle to help differentiate our brand, but also make our product stand out better and therefore represent our brand better.
I love that, Felix. I feel blog posts and presentations coming up from all of us on this one now. We're all in the business of luxury products. I'm not sure the REC has ever had anybody say that about recruitment businesses before. So thank you for elevating us into the luxury brand market. Russell, that then fits right into what you do then, isn't it? If recruitment is all about being luxury brands.
Yeah, it does. It does, Alan, because you've got to think of yourself as a luxury brand. And I think there's an interesting point here about culture, because you know, whilst most businesses, small and large, seem to be comfortable about selling their propositions, selling their products, selling what they do for customers, there is a real cultural reluctance, particularly in this country, I think, around selling ourselves. And it's really funny, you know, I did a conference some months ago, you know, specifically for the recruitment industry. And, you know, I started exploring this area of, you know, how do you sell yourself? And most people, if not all people, really struggled with that ability to be able to say, this is why I am great. This is how I make a difference. This is how I can use who I am as a human being, as an individual, to make a difference to you. And I really believe that until we start to become comfortable with aligning that ability to be able to sell ourselves as individuals and then reflecting back to our corporate brands, there's a huge opportunity being missed in being able to really sell effectively, particularly in a marketplace now where there is so little differentiation and that you really have to find increasingly creative ways. Because, you know, a marketing budget on its own won't do it. You know, I see so many companies, large companies, literally just throwing dollars at really trying to get their message across, and still they can't get cut through. So there's got to be a new dimension here. And, you know, one of the other things that I think is very interesting too here is not only do we need to be able to sell ourselves, you know, down one channel now, we have to do it multi-channel. And that means finding more ways, more angles, more stories, more ways to be able to stand out. And I think not to align the ability to be able to combine the personal branding element with your business brand is a huge missed opportunity.
All right, Russell, I think you're right, and I think it kind of lines something. Claire, you brought up this point about, you know, are the agencies representing the candidates rather than the client at the front end, where I might position it. Perhaps it should be go on the other side. Paul, I mean, this is a challenge for us as recruitment agencies, isn't it? Is that which side of this challenge point of the coin are we on? Are we representing the candidate, which means we have one kind of brand that we're positioning to the candidate, but for the clients we have a different approach and perhaps a different brand and how we are representing them. How do we balance those two?
I think just to add into that, Alan, as well, I mean, from my perspective, working in the agencies that I've worked at, we were in very sort of niche and quite highly targeted and focused verticals. So it's kind of easy to build up experts in that field in terms of recruitment, and their client base was quite small, if you like. It was quite contained, and they could develop those relationships with the hiring managers or the HR or the recruiters within those businesses really well. And that's obviously a great set of skills that a recruiter has. But I think in order for them to then take their clients and represent those clients back out to the marketplace to the best of their ability, they have to basically come at it from the candidate's perspective, and they have to put the candidate first, and they have to then figure out, okay, so how can I get closer to 100 people rather than the 10 or 20 that I currently work with? And then it's the matching and everything else that goes with being a brilliant recruiter. So for me, I think, you know, even in markets where there are not just talent shortages, but there are floods, if you like, of capable candidates or potential applicants, that you have to put yourself in their mindset. You can't be coming at it from the client perspective because it's too singular, it's too narrow a view.
Claire, don't you think there is still a certain arrogance out there with the vast majority of clients advertising jobs? If you just look at the content in most jobs, it's 80% orientated towards what the client wants. And yet we're in a candidate-driven market where it should be the other way around, where we should be selling the opportunity. You know, if somebody sitting in a job right now sees an advert and it doesn't propose that it might be a better opportunity than the one they currently have, why would they expect the candidate to respond to it? So really at basic level.
I think there is, you know, it's quite a generalist point of view, but you're right, Mark, there are still millions of adverts out there that are all coming from, you know, my client wants this, my client needs that perspective. And there's those few agencies out there that are doing it the other way around, and they're the ones that are not just doing it through the job boards, they're doing it over social, they've got their own website, and they're positioning themselves in front of the candidates rather than positioning themselves for the next job that comes available from their target market, because by virtue of their reputation, if they're the ones that are filling those jobs, they'll get them in the first place.
All right, Paul, where do you stand on this? Should we be representing the candidate? Should we be representing the customers? Which side are we on?
I think it's both. Got to sound like Switzerland. I think it's about, for me, it's less about the representation. I think the representation comes downstream. And I think for me it comes back to, you know, how do you use content to get out there into the marketplace to engage with people? And I think if you do that from a candidate perspective, then people will perceive that you're adding value. They'll see that you're credible, that you're trustworthy in terms of the information that you're providing, and we all know that once somebody's engaging with your brand, they're more likely to do business with you. I can't remember the exact percentage. It's something like 60%. It's quite high. So the more people are engaging, the better. From a customer perspective, agencies, unless you're in that outsourced model, the MSP RPO world, then most customers are quite reluctant to let an agency advertise their brand. It's about how you represent them, badged up or white labeled as an agency. And I think what Claire was saying is right. There are still too many people out there which start the job with, my customer is looking for. It's so predictable.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. We could spend days on the job advertising theme, I think, and Louis, maybe that's one of the ones we really want to focus on during the year. Time for a quick reset. We got about 15 minutes to go. This is #RecHangout. We're joined by Claire, Felix, Paul, and Russell, who have been sharing their views on what's right and what's wrong about branding within the recruitment sector. What about our personal brand? Russell's been very kind so far. He hasn't commented on any of our individual personal brands. So fortunately, we're still shading on that one.
Although Russell, conversation, Alan.
That's right. Well, we do have one of our viewers has asked us, and he really kind of pointed this to you, Russell. How do we make recruitment sexy? My position is it is anyway, but is it something? Should we be doing that? In fact, do we need to make recruitment sexy?
I think going back to this thing about luxury brands, I think we've got to make everything sexy these days, because that's the currency that we're dealing with. And I'd love to say that you can make recruitment sexy, by everybody wearing pink hats, but I'm not sure that's going to quite do it. But what I would say, and again, to me, it's a slightly different way of looking at it, but I think to make recruitment sexy, it's all about tone of voice. A challenge I give to many people in the recruitment industry is I'm amazed that we can talk about people in a way that seems so utterly impersonal. When you think about people and you think about the recruitment industry and what a wonderful industry it is because it deals in human emotions, it deals in the ability to be able to communicate who we are and what we're about. And yet, so often you guys reduce it to transactional language. It almost dehumanizes the process. And, for me, if you want to make recruitment sexy, it's about really connecting in on a basic human level and talking about people, talking about emotions, talking about stories, and really bringing what you do to life in a much more empathetic way. And again, it goes back to the point I was making earlier, is that the moment you start to emulate and mimic the language of your client, you're probably in trouble. Because whenever I talk to corporates and I talk to people who work for corporates, they say the same thing to me. I'm not a number. I don't want to be treated like I'm a commodity. I want to be treated like I'm a human being. And until the recruitment industry adjusts its tone of voice to reflect that, I think, again, it's missing a huge opportunity. And again, message to some of the smaller businesses, if you want to really stand out, if you want to build your business in a different way, it's a very, very good place to start. Simple language, human emotions, the ability to be able to talk as normal people talk, as customers talk.
Thank you, Russell. Let me bring this point up then, and Claire, we're going to follow on the theme you put in our chat box. Does this mean we're recruiting for the wrong sets of skills in our recruitment businesses? Claire, your point is normally we're still recruiting for sales skill, but we're not recruiting for marketing talent or branding talent or empathetic talent. We're just recruiting salespeople. Have we got that wrong?
I think we've got it wrong for now, because I think we're still going through a transition in terms of what's happening outside the industry in terms of external factors putting pressure on the market. I think, unfortunately, we all are probably quite guilty of reverting back to time, which is, when it comes to the Monday morning, it's about getting the deals over the line and, getting a check in the till. It's not about posting content or tweeting or posting articles out. So for me, somebody asked a question earlier about how do you do this if you're a smaller size organisation. I guess I'm quite fortunate that over the last 3 years we've gone from sort of 1 to 5 people in the marketing team. We keep the skills separate to a degree. So we've got a great team who are just absolutely brilliant at everything they do. However, they work very, very closely with the business. They do regularly do sort of roadshows. They regularly go around people, helping them and advising how to not only represent themselves but also to represent the brand, and what they can do to get behind what the marketing team do to make it easy for those guys to connect with talent. So I think to answer your question, I think we're still quite in the middle of the traditional sort of hiring the traditional sort of salespeople. I think the market will change. I think it slightly is changing, and it's really interesting. You can talk to my guys within the organisation, the people that will make the transition to that new world, and some of the old ones that are just not going to get there at all. Whether you take them and they go kicking and screaming, they're just not going to go.
All right, thanks. Felix, where are you on the types of people we're hiring and the skills we could be looking for? You've gone through a bunch of startups as well. Are we just not looking for the right type of people, or are we stuck in this, oh my God, I got to make my numbers mentality that the poll refers to?
No, I think it's getting, it's certainly different, and it's certainly, even over the last years, you always have people who stand out and understand that marketing and sales are actually completely connected. I think that's sometimes something that we forget, that even when we talk, should you focus on the candidate side or on the recruiters or on the client side, actually it's a supply chain. It's the same with marketing and sales. They're all connected. And yes, obviously more marketing talent would be positive in recruitment, but it's more an awareness of how the market is changing and more of an awareness of that there's an external world that we don't have any control over. And it starts with, and for me, the key thing though to say is it starts with the leadership.
Well, and that presupposes that our employers actually have good leadership, doesn't it? But you're right. I agree with that. Mark, you had a point you wanted to bring into this, I believe.
Yeah, there's a topic that's reiterated itself several times this afternoon, and that is that the brand is basically the people acting on your behalf are the brand, which is something I picked out of an article that Felix wrote. If the people talking about your business are your brand, then what sort of a role do sites like Glassdoor play in reflecting us as businesses? Because when you look at things like Glassdoor, they're heavily dominated by comments from people who've left your organisation, and so can give quite a negative slant on a business which otherwise might be very reputable and look after its staff, but obviously people leave. It's a sales environment, and they never want to blame themselves when they don't succeed in the business they've been working for. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, guys, that might be a good one kind of to take us through. We've only got about sort of a little bit less than 10 minutes left. If it is about the external view, if it is, as we said at the top of the show, a bit more about what they say about us and where they say it about us, and we're talking about this impact of brand on our business, can we control it? Can we influence it? How do we assess what that impact is, and what do we do to address it? Felix, I see your head nodding there. I'll let you kick off on that one first then.
Well, I think clearly you can't control it, but you can certainly influence it. I mean, what you have to think about, Mark, you say that at Glassdoor it's mainly only disgruntled employees, but that would mean that at TripAdvisor, all the ratings, or at Amazon, all of the ratings that you would see would only be from people who don't like it. So I actually think it's not just that you can say you only get the negative reviews, but you will get a mix of reviews. Maybe now at the moment, because Glassdoor is relatively young in the UK, you get more mixed reviews. But generally, I think the key thing is not necessarily focusing. Obviously, it's important to focus on what people say on the outside, but the key thing is not to alter your means in what you do only because of what externally is being said. but what is right for you, what is right for your business, what is right for your personality is much more important than playing to an audience and trying to be somebody or some company that you're not.
All right, Claire, I can see you nodding there. What's your thought on this?
Well, I did some research for a course I did last year, and we looked at review sites quite heavily. And actually, the stats in terms of sites like TripAdvisor and Glassdoor say that actually people 8 times out of 10 will put positive comments up there, more so than negative comments, because actually, as people, our humanity is that we want to be heard for good stuff as opposed to being heard for bad stuff. We're not naturally bitches. I don't, there is obviously that kind of level of I've got to get this off my chest and out there, but we don't tend to do that on sites like TripAdvisor or Glassdoor. It is genuinely good comments. And also as well, if you go back and look at those, and I talk about using Glassdoor from a recruiter perspective to find out really what is the culture of that client that you're trying to represent. Because going back to what Russell said, is that we don't need to mimic that client for face value, but what we do need to know, and what we do need and should be able to represent, is what the real truth of working there looks like to somebody who's never even seen it. And we should be able to tell them, go and have a look on Glassdoor, figure out what other people are saying, go and talk to people on Twitter and in Facebook, and find out what their true, candid response is when you mention the name. So yeah, it's a good thing to talk about your experiences, but I think kind of going back to Mark's point, it's not necessarily always negative, and actually quite a lot of the time the stuff there that businesses should be learning from as well. If it is negative, you need to react and therefore not control the message that you're giving out there, but give them an indication that you're reacting to it and you're responding to it.
I think that's right, and I think you've got to be all in if you're going to engage on these various approaches to the media, don't you? Because if you just sort of dip in once in a while to respond to one comment and then disappear again, you might as well not have bothered. So it's almost better either ignore it or just dive in and really engage with people. Paul, how do you guys deal with it at InterQuest? Do you actually track the Glassdoors and those other sites and respond to them? What do you do with it?
Yeah, we actually track everything, Alan. And one of the earlier questions was, how do you track what your employees are saying and doing? So I think there's 2 routes here. I think if you're going to either recruit somebody internally, or you're trying to attract talent to become candidates, or indeed you're looking at it from a customer perspective, I think it's about how you represent yourselves through multiple channels. And I think it's about trying to show the face of an organization from inside out. So you're trying to influence the perception. So whether that be having a Facebook page and being quite open in terms of who the employees are, whether it be making sure that the website, an organisation's website is fully functioning and representative of your organisation. There's lots and lots of different channels. We monitor absolutely everything, as I said, but we certainly don't control it. For me, it's about how you respond and how you respond positively.
Ross, that fits square into your comfort zone, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from a human perspective, I'm probably the most anal person when it comes to TripAdvisor and booking a holiday, and I do a huge amount of research, just as people do on organisations and agencies, and you will always get negative comments on there. That doesn't really, put me off from going to a place for a holiday. But what does is the response that somebody gives when a complaint has been posted.
Well, I think you're right. We're always times looking more at the responses necessarily than just the initial complaint, aren't we? Russell, nearing the end, when you're dealing with the personal branding, how do your clients measure the impact they're having, and do they address if there's been some negativity to what you've been trying to help them do?
This is one of the great challenges, Alan, because a lot of people, and it doesn't matter whether it's your business brand or your personal brand, people fall into the trap of okay, on the business brand, we'll create a logo, we'll create something that looks great and represents our company, and then they don't bother investing in it thereafter. And I think the point that's been made that a really clever brand strategy really needs to be constantly evolving. You've got to be going back to it. You've got to be reviewing where you are. You've also got to recognize that, you know, brands evolve as we evolve as human beings. And therefore, you know, you may have looked at your brand, you know, a year ago, but a year later, the world can look very different. And I think the point's been very well made that, you know, particularly in a world of social media, not to be on top of this stuff, not review where you are, review your point of view, and think about how you're being represented is a huge underinvestment in actually your most precious asset, which is your brand. And that works at the business level, and it absolutely works at the personal brand level as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Russell. I know, Paul, you wanted to try and dive in with something, but I've just been looking at the clock, and we've hit the hour mark. I think, guys, we could most likely have carried on with this for another hour or two. It's been one of our best Rec Hangouts ever. Louise is going to pull a lot of this stuff into the blog post. We've had some good comments from our viewers, Sebastian and others. Paul, you'll be happy to know that Aida has been actually focusing on the Twitter stream, supporting what you've been saying, so you haven't been out there completely alone. I'd just like to thank the panel of Claire, Felix, Paul, and Russell, and obviously our stalwart co-host of Felix, Mark, and Louise. Felix, I'm going to kick it over to you as the sort of final wrap, and what are we doing in our next show?
Do you mean Louis? You said Felix. Right, yeah, thank you guys. I don't know where Alan is having some sort of attack here. So, yeah, thank you everyone. The next show, well, firstly I'll wrap it up. We will be sending out the recruiters resource to everyone who signed up to this Hangout. You'll get the recording of the video, you'll get a slide share, which is a sort of like a PDF of transcription of all the good points everyone made, so you can share it with your friends and family and loved ones. You'll get a summary article notes from the UK Recruiter blog, where Louise will link to loads of other resources. So we'll find all the blogs and that these guys will write here, and other resources from places like the Undercover Recruiter that might be relevant. In terms of the next Hangout, it will most likely be on the 2nd of April. We are going to have a good hangout actually for the next one, and it's going to be on the best companies to work for, Sunday Times, small companies to work for. We're going to get people on like Faden International, hopefully Arrows Group I'm talking to, Console Partners, a load of recruitment agencies, and they're going to tell us, leading on from this hangout, what makes a good culture, how they've gone about getting onto that list, becoming great recruitment businesses to come to work for. And there's actually a load of recruitment businesses on that list, so it's great to see. I think that is it. I will put more information about the next hangout on the colleague blog and email it out to all you guys watching, so you'll know where to sign up for the next one. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to all of our guests. And thanks, Alan, for doing a great job at hosting. I think that's pretty much everything, isn't it? Fantastic.
That sounds like everything. And no, Felix, I haven't hired you as our new host. We're not going to get rid of Louis just yet.
Oh, and also, do follow us on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn link is just there. If you have any further questions, I'm sure our guests will be on there too, and you can direct them to them and continue the conversation there. So take care, everyone. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Luke.